Hey, fourth graders, this is Miss Walgie. It's Monday, September 21st, and today in reading, we are working on character, setting, and plot. So what are we learning and doing today? Today, we're going to continue to explore poetry as we read Love That Dog on pages 64 through 72. We'll find the gist of what happened, and we'll talk about how Jack feels about it. Then we'll read Rapunzel. We'll annotate the text and answer test-style questions about it. So here we go. We're going to read pages 64 through 72. Let's do that now. Before I get started, I do want you to know, this is a little bit of a warning, today's reading does get emotional. So if you need to pause the video at any point and take a minute for yourself, it's totally understandable. I just wanted to give you a little heads up. April 26th. Sometimes when you are trying not to think about something, it keeps popping back into your head and you can't help it. And you think about it and think about it and think about it until your brain feels like a squashed pea. There were a couple things I noticed on this page. I noticed that Jack uses the words "you think about it" or "think about it" multiple times. I know that in poetry, when I see the same words repeated multiple times, that is repetition. I also heard Jack say that when he thinks like this, his brain feels like a squashed pea. I know that his brain isn't actually a squashed pea. He used the word "like," so he is comparing his brain's feeling to a squash pea. That is an example of a simile because he used the word "like." Let's go to May 2nd. May 2nd, yes, you can type up the thing about trying not to think about something, but you'd better leave my name off of it, because if it was just words coming out of my head and I wasn't paying too much attention to which words came out when. May 7th, maybe you could show me how to use the computer, and then I could type up my own words. When I read these pages on May 2nd, it sounded like Jack wasn't too confident in what he wrote on April 26th. I know this because, again, he's talking about leaving his name off of it because he didn't really think about it too much. It was just words coming out of his head. But on May 7th, it seems like he's interested in typing up his own words by learning how to use a computer. May 8th, I didn't know how the spell checking thing inside the computer, I'm gonna restart. May 8th, I didn't know about the spell checking thing inside the computer. It is like a miracle, little brain in there, a little helper brain. But I am a slow typer person. Did you say there is a teaching typing thing in that computer too? Will it help me better? Will it help me type better and faster? Tap, 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 so my fingers can go as fast as my brain. There's a couple of things I see here. I notice that we have two stanzas. I notice that Jack is comparing the spell check in the computer to a little helper brain. He talks about his own typing skills, and I see him say tap, 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 tap multiple times. So that's repetition, but also tap. I feel like is an onomatopoeia there because it's a sound. So he's using another form of figurative language. Let's go to May 14th. May 14th, I typed this up myself. My sky. We were outside in the street, me and some other kids, kicking the ball before dinner. And Sky was chasing, chasing, chasing with his feet going every which way and his tail wag, wag, wagging. And his mouth slob, slob, slobbering. And he was all over the place, smiling and wagging and slobbering and making us laugh. And my dad came walking up the street. He was way down there near the end. I could see him after he got off the bus. And he was walking. And I saw him wave. And he called out, "Hey there, son." And so I didn't see the car coming from the other way until someone else, one of the big kids, called out, "Car!" And I turned around and I saw a blue car, splattered with mud, speeding down the road. And I saw Sky going after the ball, wagging in his tail. And I called him, "Sky, Sky," and he turned his head, but it was too late because the blue car, splattered with mud, hit Sky. Thud, 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 and kept on going in such a hurry, so fast, so many miles to go, it couldn't even stop, and Sky was just there in the road, lying on his side, with his legs bent funny and his side heaving, and he looked up at me and I said, "Sky, Sky, Sky." And then my dad was there, and he lifted Sky out of the road and laid him on the grass. And Sky closed his eyes, and he never opened them again, ever. All right, fourth graders, sorry if you heard me get a little bit teary. I love dogs, and I was thinking of my own dog, and so I started to tear up a little bit. Right now, I want you to pause the lesson, and I want you to answer the Love That Dog questions that are in Kid'em. You're going to be asked what was happening on these pages and how was Jack feeling. Make sure you do that now. So pause this video and go answer the questions about Love That Dog and Kid'em. And when you're ready and you've answered those questions, then you can push play again. All right, fourth graders, we're going to talk about our learning targets for today. Today, we want to be able to identify the character, setting, and plot in the story. We want to be able to annotate a text, and we want to be able to answer test-style questions. Remember, last week, we started talking about character, setting, and plot. We used this chart to help us organize our thoughts. So characters are who are in the story. Setting, we think about where and when does the story take place. The plot is what happens at the beginning, middle, and end of the story. And we use BME to help us remember beginning, middle, end, and we can organize that after we read. Also, let's think about character traits. So I'm going to show you an anchor chart about character traits now. Okay, when we talk about character traits, we don't think about just the outside of a character. So not only what they look like, as we can see this little example of an illustration, we see that this is a boy, he has brown hair, he's tall, he has brown eyes, he's wearing boots, shorts, and a green shirt. When we talk about character traits, we want to think about the inside. So we use the character's thoughts, their actions. So what do they do in the story? Their words that we see in quotation marks, their feelings based on how they think and what they do. Basically, we're talking about their personality traits when we talk about character traits. And that means what we learn based on what the character says, does, thinks, and feels. All right, we're going to read the story of Rapunzel now. While we're reading, we're thinking about the characters. We're going to think about what's happening in the beginning, middle, and end of the story, where the story takes place. And we're looking for those things, those thoughts, those words, those actions that help us describe the character. All right, here's our text today. I know that anytime I have a new text in front of me, that I can highlight the title. And I know that I should number the paragraphs. Let's go ahead and do that now. So there's 5 paragraphs on this first page. And we go through paragraph 11 on the second page. Oh, no, sorry. Paragraph 11 on the second page, and let's keep going. So we have 16 paragraphs total. Remember, this file is also attached to your lesson, and it's a good idea to have the text in front of you if you have the ability to print at home. You can pause the video if you need to do that and print this off so that way you can annotate with me. Let's annotate the text now while we read. Once upon a time, long ago, there lived a man and his wife in a little house that overlooked a beautiful garden. This was no ordinary garden, for it belonged to a sorceress that was feared by all in the land. In this garden, the sorceress grew the finest fruits, vegetables, and herbs, and she surrounded it with a high wall to protect it. Nobody ever dared to enter it. All right, so in this first paragraph, I notice once upon a time long ago. This is the beginning of a story. I also know that this is a fairy tale because it says once upon a time. I heard about a man and his wife. I know that they live in a little house. So it's my setting right now that overlooks a beautiful garden. I also heard the word sorceress. Sometimes people use sorcerer or sorceress, kind of like a witch or a wizard, someone that has magical powers. So this garden is owned by the sorceress. And we know it's a very special garden because it has the finest fruits. Finest means like the best that's available. Finest fruits, vegetables, and herbs were in this garden. All right, let's go to paragraph 2. One day while looking out her window, a woman saw the tastiest looking Rapunzel growing so fresh and green in the sorceress's garden. Being that she was with child, she craved the Rapunzel. Day after day, she refused to eat, but instead she stood by the window longing for the Rapunzel. Her husband grew worried because the wife became weaker and weaker as the days passed. Finally, he asked her, "My dear, what is the matter? Why will you not eat?" She replied, "I don't feel like eating anything except the Rapunzel from that garden. I feel as though I will die if I don't get some." Let's look back at this paragraph now and annotate. So the woman that we started reading about in paragraph 1 is looking at the tastiest Rapunzel. So I know that Rapunzel has to be a plant based on how I heard it used in paragraph 2. We're still talking about the home that's next to the sorceress's garden. I heard she was with child. That tells me that she's pregnant and that she's going to have a baby. She craved the Rapunzel. When you crave something, it's like all you can think about. If it's a food that you crave, you have to eat it because it's on your mind. So I heard some actions other than craving the Rapunzel of the woman that's in the story. I heard day after day, she refused to eat. She stood by the window, longing for the Rapunzel. And then I heard about her husband. He grew worried. Her husband grew worried because the wife is getting weaker and weaker. And I'm going to highlight the quotation marks here so that way I can remember to use those to help me identify character traits. The husband asked, "What is the matter? Why will you not eat?" She replied, "I don't feel like eating anything except the Rapunzel from that garden. I feel as though I will die if I don't get some." So this woman really wants that Rapunzel. When the husband heard this, he knew he had to bring her some. He loved his wife very much and would do anything for her, even if it meant entering the sorceress's garden. All right, so I heard how much this husband loves his wife. He would do anything for her. That evening, the man climbed the wall and grabbed a handful of Rapunzel. But just as he was about to escape the garden, the sorceress suddenly appeared. "How dare you take from me like a thief? You shall pay for this," said the sorceress. I'm going to highlight. her words, said the sorceress. The man pleaded with her, "Please, my wife is growing weak and will surely die if she doesn't have the Rapunzel from your garden." "I beg of you, please have mercy. She is with child and needs to eat." So he's pleading. Pleading is like begging. Upon hearing this, the sorceress thought for a moment. "You may have all the Rapunzel in my garden on one condition. You will give me your daughter when she is born. I will care for her as if she were my own." Okay, so this is the sorcerer's words. She wants the daughter in exchange for the Rapunzel. Though the man did not want to agree to this, he felt as though he had no choice since he feared losing his wife. Soon after the child was born, the sorceress came and took the baby to raise as her own. She named the baby Rapunzel. So the man agreed, and the sorceress came and took the baby, named the baby Rapunzel. Let's go on to paragraph 6. Rapunzel grew into the most beautiful girl. Okay, I'm going to stop for a second. So to me, it sounds like we just reached possibly the middle of the story, because we've had a transition from once upon a time long ago, there was a man, his wife, and we were introduced to the sorceress. Now, Rapunzel, who was a baby at the end of the first page, has grown into the most beautiful girl when she turned 12. And when she turned 12, the sorceress shut her up in a tall tower in the middle of the forest, far away from everyone. This tower had no doors or stairs. It only had a little window high at the top from which Rapunzel could look out. So I'm introduced to Rapunzel, and I'm told that she is the most beautiful girl. And then we heard what the sorceress did. The sorceress shut her up in a tall tower, and that Rapunzel could only look out. So I'm going to write, time has passed here, because I know that she's now 12 years old. So 12 years have gone by. Paragraph 7. When the sorceress came to visit her each day to bring her food, the sorceress would call up to Rapunzel and say, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your golden hair." Rapunzel would wrap her long golden braid of hair around a hook and then drape it down to her mother below so she could climb the tower and enter. All right, so I heard some quotations here. I saw them. Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your golden hair. And we are talking about the sorceress still and Rapunzel. So Rapunzel would drape it and let her mother enter, climb the tower. Nobody except the sorceress visited Rapunzel. As a result, she became very lonely. To pass the time, Rapunzel would spend her days looking out the window and singing. A few years had passed, so some more time has gone by, when a prince happened by on his way through the forest. Rapunzel's beautiful voice caught his attention, and he knew that he had to meet the girl who won his heart. The prince rode into the forest every day to listen to Rapunzel singing. All right, I'm going to stop for a second because I've got some thoughts going on. So I know on the first page we talked about the man, his wife, and the sorceress. I know that a baby was born, and the sorceress was given the baby in exchange for the Rapunzel plant that the pregnant woman ate. I know that the setting at the beginning of that first page was the sorceress's garden and the house that was next to it. Now our setting has changed. We have been in the tall tower since paragraph 6, and everything that's happening right now involves Rapunzel being in the tower. I'm going to start again on paragraph 9. The prince rode into the forest every day to listen to Rapunzel singing. He was determined. Determined means he's focused on doing something it's all he wants to do. He was determined to come up with a plan so he could meet her. One day, while sitting under a tree and listening, he saw the sorceress come up to the tower and watched her call up to Rapunzel. Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your golden hair. At that moment, the prince knew the way to get up to the tower to meet the girl with whom he fell in love. So he feels like he loves Rapunzel. I also want to go back to paragraph 8 because I was just thinking that we should talk about what Rapunzel is doing. So we heard that Rapunzel became very lonely because no one else visited her except the sorceress. We heard that Rapunzel spent her days, is what she's doing, looking out of the window and singing. So her singing is what caught the prince's attention. And we heard that he sat under a tree and listened, and that gave him the vision of the sorceress going up the tower, and now he knows how to do it. That evening, after the sorceress had left, the prince called up to Rapunzel, 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 let down your golden hair. And to Rapunzel's surprise, she met the prince and fell in love with him as well. So they met each other, and they're in love. Night after night, the prince returned. Knowing the sorceress would not approve of anyone visiting the tower, they kept their meetings a secret. So the prince keeps coming back, and they're keeping it a secret. This was a big risk they were both willing to take. Being so in love, they wanted to be married. So the two planned for Rapunzel's escape from the tower. In love, they're planning the escape. But before they could carry out their plan, the sorceress had found out about the prince. Oh no. In her anger, the sorceress came up with a plan of her own. She grabbed a pair of scissors and cut off Rapunzel's braid. Then she took Rapunzel to a land far from the tower and left her there alone to fend for herself. The sorceress then made her way back to the tower and waited for the prince. So we had a lot of actions from the sorceress in this paragraph. We heard that she had anger. She grabbed a pair of scissors and cut off Rapunzel's braid. She took Rapunzel to a land far from the tower. She left her there. Fend for herself means that she has to take care of herself, get her own food, meet all of the needs that she has on her own. Then we heard that she went back to the tower and waited for the prince. Let's go to page 3. Paragraph 12. That evening, when the prince called to Rapunzel to let her hair down, the witch let down Rapunzel's braid that she had cut. That's very interesting to me. She let down Rapunzel's braid that she had cut. Not knowing it was a trap, the prince climbed Rapunzel's golden locks. So when I heard these things in paragraph 12, I pictured in my head that the sorceress is really tricky. She tricked the sorceress. She tricked the prince into climbing up. The prince is trusting because he didn't think twice about climbing Rapunzel's golden locks. Not knowing it was a trap, the prince climbed Rapunzel's golden locks. When the sorceress surprised him at the window, she pushed him, and the prince fell hard into the thorny bushes far below. This tragic fall left the poor prince blind. Oh, wow. So the sorceress surprised him and then she pushed him. The prince fell hard, and now he's blind. Heartbroken over losing Rapunzel, the prince wandered the land for years and years, blind and living only on berries and roots. But despite his state of despair, the prince never gave up searching in hopes to find his one true love. So he's heartbroken, he's wandering, he's blind, he can only eat berries and roots. He's in a state of despair. Despair means like he's really sad. It's like hopeless, but he never gave up because he was hoping to find his one true love. Meanwhile, Rapunzel found ways to survive on her own in the wilderness. So Rapunzel has still been in the wilderness. She had since given birth to twins and was able to find food and shelter for herself and her babies. So we have two more characters now. We've got her babies. However, she still longed to be with her prince and her sadness, so she is sad as well. In her sadness, she often cried herself to sleep, yet she never gave up hope. So that's something that they have in common here. I heard that they both, even though things are so sad, that they're not giving up. Then one day, the prince happened upon the place far away where Rapunzel had been taken that night. The sorceress had banished her from the tower. When he heard the songs of a voice he once knew and loved, he followed the beautiful sound until he made his way to Rapunzel. She knew at once it was the prince and ran into his arms. Rapunzel was so happy to see him, she wept. As she cried, 2 of her tears fell into the prince's eyes, and he was able to see again. The prince led Rapunzel and his new family back to his kingdom. The couple was married at once, and they all lived happily ever after. Remember, wept means cry. I know that this is the end of a fairy tale because they lived happily ever after. All right, let's look back at this story and figure out where is the beginning, where is the middle, and where is the end. All right, 4th graders, I'm back on page 1 of the text that we read, Rapunzel. I'm thinking to myself, I remember reading this whole first page and that I'm told the first 3 characters, I'm told about the sorceress, the man and his wife who becomes pregnant and craves the Rapunzel. I know that during all of the paragraphs on this page, that it's setting me up for the rest of the story. At the end of this page, we are told that the baby is born, she's given to the sorceress, and her name is Rapunzel. I would say, based on what I read, that this entire page is the beginning of the story. So I'm going to kind of make a little box here, and I'm going to write beginning. All right, this is the beginning. So now my job is to figure out where is the middle of the story and where does the middle change to the end. In paragraph 6, we are told about Rapunzel growing into the most beautiful girl. So I know that the middle starts here. I'm going to start writing middle right here, and I'm going to hook it around paragraph 6. The rest of this page was telling me about Rapunzel living in a tower and that she lets down her hair whenever the sorceress comes to visit her. And then we meet the prince. The prince is determined to come up with a plan to meet Rapunzel. And I would say that this whole page is still the middle because it's talking about the prince coming and visiting her more and more often and that they fall in love. This is all still the middle. All right. Paragraph 12. This is when there is a change because remember, the end of page 2, Rapunzel and the prince had made a plan to leave together, but the sorceress stepped in and surprised them both. This is still technically the middle of the story to me because this is where she takes Rapunzel away. She had cut her hair. And the prince is now blind because she pushed him out of a window. I would say, I'm going to write middle again here, middle. I would say that the change really comes here in paragraph 15. Then let's look back at that. Then one day the prince happened upon a place far away where Rapunzel had been taken that night. The sorceress had banished her from the tower. So he went to where she had been taken when she was banished from the tower. He knew at once it was Rapunzel because of the songs of a voice he knew. So to me, this is the end of the story because it tells us that she knew too, and they cried, she ran to his arms. So I think that the end is really here on paragraphs 15 and 16 because it's when the prince and Rapunzel find each other again and they're so happy, they cry, and they go back to his kingdom and they're married. So this is the end. So everything built up to, everything in the middle introduced us to the characters of Rapunzel and the prince and them falling in love, a really bad thing happening, being separated, and then finally at the end they're reunited again. Let's look at some test style questions now. All right, fourth graders, we're going to answer some test style questions. There will also be some additional questions for you to answer in Kidam. So make sure that you follow along now and that you answer the questions on your own in Kidam. Let's look at number 1, part A. What lesson did the prince and Rapunzel learn? So when we hear the word lesson, that tells us that we're talking about the theme. We've been talking about theme for a couple of weeks now. So we need to think about A, B, C, and D and think about if we heard that lesson in the story. A says if something sounds too good to be true, it probably is. B says treat others the way you'd want to be treated. C says if you're determined, you will find a way. And D says don't judge a book by its cover. I know that I heard the word determined multiple times in the story. I heard the prince was determined. And I also remember reading about Rapunzel and the prince not giving up hope on finding each other, which ties to the word determined. To be able to choose C, I'm going to look at the evidence here in part B and figure out if that is the best choice. So let's look at part B. This is asking us to find the piece of evidence from the text that best supports our answer to part A. A says, meanwhile, Rapunzel found a way to survive on her own in the wilderness. B says she grabbed a pair of scissors and cut off Rapunzel's braid. C says, this tragic fall left the poor prince blind. And D says, when he heard the songs of a voice he once knew and loved, he followed the beautiful sound until he made his way to Rapunzel. To me, reading these 4 pieces of evidence tells me that C is the best choice because I heard a piece of evidence that talked about being being determined. I'm going to look back at these choices now and decide which one is the best choice to support that theme of being determined and finding a way. I know that cutting off Rapunzel's braid did not tie to the prince or Rapunzel being determined. I know that the fall leaving the prince blind does not completely relate to being determined. So that brings me down to A and D. Meanwhile, Rapunzel found a way to survive on her own in the wilderness. Well, I think that you could say that that's being determined, but I know that the prince and Rapunzel were so sad, but they still wouldn't give up hope of finding each other. And to me, D is the best choice because the prince was blind, but he still heard that voice and he followed it until he found Rapunzel. So to me, that's being determined and finding a way. Let's look at 2. What message? So again, we've got message here. That is still talking about the theme. When we hear message or lesson questions, we know that we're talking about the theme. What message does this story send to the reader? A, life decisions can be hard. B, you can't give up when met with a challenge. C, always follow your heart. D, a cheerful attitude can change your day. Since we answered number 1 and part B together, I want you to pause the video and I want you to answer this question in Kidam. Which of these messages does the story send the reader based on what we read? When you're ready, push play and we'll go on to number 4. Yes, we did skip number 3. We're going to number 4. Using context clues, what is the meaning of the word pleaded? Pleaded. Let's go back to the text and find the word pleaded. That was on the first page on paragraph 4. How dare you take from me like a thief? You shall pay for this, said the sorceress. The man pleaded with her. Please, my wife is growing weak and will surely die if she doesn't have the Rapunzel from your garden. I beg of you, please have mercy. She is with child and needs to eat. All right, let's look and see which one of these is the best choice. Is it A, begged, B, ignored, C, refused, or D, explore? I want you to pause the video and go answer in Kidam. Push play when you're ready. And we're going on to question 5. Which of the following has the same vowel sound as wife? We're talking about the word wife. A, living, B, waited, C, prince, D, climbed. Go answer in Kidam now. Push pause, go answer, come back and push play. Number 6, what is a synonym? I know when I hear synonym, that means a similar meaning. What is a synonym for the word banished? Is it A, get rid of, B, accept, C, plant, or D, include? Remember, Rapunzel was banished from the tower. Which of these choices makes the most sense? Go ahead and go to Kidam now and answer this question. 7 says, what is a good character trait to describe Rapunzel? We want to choose all that apply. I want you in Kidam to answer this question. Choose the one that you think is the best. Is it A, selfish, B, lonely, C, cowardly, D, daring, or E, determined? You will only be able to answer one of these choices, so I want you to choose the best one. Remember, character traits are found by thinking about the actions, the thoughts, the words used by the character, and their feelings. Number 8, what caused the man in the beginning to act the way he did? He was hungry. A says he was hungry and only the Rapunzel would satisfy his taste. B says he believed he was harvesting his own crop of Rapunzel. C says he wasn't able to provide enough food for his family, so he had to steal from the sorceress. D said he believed his wife would die if she didn't get the Rapunzel to eat and he didn't want to lose her. Pause the video, answer this question in Kidam, and come back. Number 9 says, what happened as a result of the sorceress wanting to keep Rapunzel all to herself? So remember, as a result tells us that it's an effect. It's something that happens because of something else. So because the sorceress wanted to keep Rapunzel, what happened? Is it A, she ate Rapunzel from her own garden? B, she caused the prince to go blind? C, she locked her in a tower? Or D, she allowed her to marry the prince? Think about what happened throughout the story and which of those makes the best sense. I want you to answer that in Kidam now. All right, 4th graders, so these were the things that we wanted to be able to do today. We identified the character and we talked about the setting and plot in the story. We annotated the text and we answered test style questions. So now if you haven't already done so, it is your turn. You are going to go to Kidam and answer those questions that were asked in the story. I want you to go do that now. Great job today, and we'll see you tomorrow. Bye.